That's right, folks. Today we get exhausted. First step, so now that you've done step one successfully, you're going to want to get under the car once it's cooled down. That is step 1.5. Let the car cool down, and you want to spray penetrating oil on all the exhaust nuts and bolts, because they are the rustiest thing you'll ever see in a car. They're on the outside of the car. They get hot and cold all the time, sucking moisture, and they just corrode up. So even a 5-year-old car like this, I can see they're quite rusty. What a flattering angle. So once you've sprayed all the bolts, car's completely cool, couple of hours, let it seep in there. It's good to have one of these things. It'll save you a lot of hassle. If you don't have one, buy one or borrow one. Now, one thing you'll notice, I'm starting from the back of the car and working my way forward. And the method to my madness is that the bolts get rusted on. These actually look really good, so it's not even likely to happen, but an older car it could. As the bolts get rusted on, one of the last ports of call you'll have before you resort to the angle grinder is that you'll run the car up to temperature and you'll spray icy cold water on the bolt, and the idea is that it will shrink faster than the actual bracket, and that shrinking process could crack the rust inside. As I said, it's a Hail Mary. It does work. I've seen it work in the factory before, and that's why I'm starting from the back and working my way forward, because if I was to start at the front and I had a bolt stuck up the back, I can't run the back because there's no exhaust heating up the back, if that makes sense. It makes sense to me. Really and quite good, Nick. Silicone spray is a must to get your lugs out of the rubber. Much easier. When you push it, it's slowly going, whereas without the silicone, it'll just jerk and bash your hands on something. One more swap. Yes. Alright, I can't see this exhaust coming out without taking this plate off. Well, I don't have an exhaust dropping on my head, so that's good. It's a good idea to put the bolts back where you got them from and screw them right up so I don't scrape my fat guts when I'm rolling around underneath here. Now, nuts and bolts wise, it looks like this is all that's holding the exhaust on with the rubbers. That, and on the left hand side, the passenger side, plus the two oxygen sensors. I'm just going to disconnect them too and just leave them connected to the exhaust as I take it out, and I'll remove them when the exhaust is out of the car. Now, if you're not always under a car for a living like the backyard bush mechanic here, it's a good idea to have a towel underneath your head, because I'd be quite sick and sore at the end of the day if I'm rolling around under here without any comfort. Whatever you do, don't use Mum's Best Sheridan towels. Just use old towels you don't care about, even old t-shirts, an old rag, just something under your head, because you can actually brush your head on the front and your natural reaction is to go back, and you don't want to go bang, 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 which I've done before, and I felt sorry for the car and the concrete, and it hurt. Okay, so I've figured out how to disconnect the oxygen sensor. Okay, so there's a little green, this little green tab here. You've got to pull it out first. It's a little bit tight, but just pull it out, it'll pop out. And then you'll just lever the side little part of the plug here, and it should just pull out. If you can't figure it out, then you shouldn't be under a car. Now, it's a good idea. What I've done is I've taped up one of the sides with some duct tape that says drivers, because I think this, when I get this off, it's going to look the same upside down. So I don't want to confuse the oxygen sensors. I want to stick the oxygen sensor that was on the driver's side on that side and the other one on the other side. I don't want to mix them up. Even though we're going to get a tune, I still don't want to do it. It's a good idea to have a long series 15mm socket in here. There's a crappy little 3/8 ratchet I've got in here. The bolt protrudes so much from the nut, but I got away with it with an extension and just putting the extension halfway in. Look what I found. The right tool for the job. Now that's all undone. Let that be a lesson to you. Get the right tool for the job. Now this is a part I'm not looking forward to, is getting most of the exhaust out from under the car. Okay, once all your bolts are out and your oxygen sensors are disconnected, you're gonna hit this with a persuader, a hammer, just tap away. It is gonna break away. It's gonna be sort of rusted on and corroded on by this white goo. When I was doing that last shot, that's what I had to contend with. Having that drop down on top of me while I'm doing the camera work. It's not super heavy. It won't kill you, probably won't even hurt you, but it's a pain in the ass when you're filming. Now all we've got to do, spray the back with silicone and push them off. So from the back of the car, there's your rubbers and lugs that are holding the rest of the exhaust in. Give them a good soak of the silicone stuff, and that should push right out. I was right. Now before we start on the last part of the job, which is removing the cat stractors as I call them, we're just going to have some lunch. Take the engine cover off. This is a job I'm not looking forward to, taking the cat stractors off and putting them back on. It's just 4 bolts. Disconnect the battery, disconnect the oxygen sensor, and now you've got a bit of room to get in there. Once again, your long series sockets are going to be invaluable here. There's a lot of 15mm on this job, so make sure you've got a 15mm long mil socket in both the 3/8 drive and a 1/2 inch drive for your rattle gun if that's what you've got. Okay, now that's removed from the engine. I've left the nuts on there so it just doesn't fall straight onto the deck. Luckily they weren't torqued up ridiculously at the factory. They were quite easy to break. There's no gasket glued by the looks of it, which is good. So there's nothing to scrape. And looking at it, it looks like there's a nice clear diagonal out. So let's unscrew the rest of it and get her out. After a very tight squeeze, that side's all off and ready to be pulled out and dropped out. We're going to go to the other side. What makes this job very hard is you've got to get the car up in the air. You can't really take these off while it's on the ground because you've got to drive up on the ramps. Another good idea is to grab some cheapest sandwich bags that you can possibly grab and keep your nuts in those, because it's going to be easier to find a missing sandwich bag than it is to find a missing nut. Now I'll leave a trick once again. It's like it's a tool for that. It's not even a ring span, it's a lever. Like you see this large bolt, it's a lever. It's always a case of trying whatever tools you've got. In this case, it was the shortest 15mm spanner I had that gave me the room in there to get it undone. I'll show you what I'm talking about. Now we've got that guy off there, but down underneath 6 o'clock of it, there is another one, which was the one I was struggling with most. But we got there, like I said, a short 15mm spanner is the way to go. And you could try universal joints and universal joints and universal joints, and probably, if you had a hoist, come from underneath. But now the rest of the fight continues, a tiny little turn at a time. To avoid grease, put the easiest nut you can to get off, and take him off last. And that will hold up the catch tractor, so it's not weighing down on your difficult nut to remove. Now that has got to be the most difficult nut to remove while that engine is still in that engine bay. Now that's every nut removed that's holding the catch tractors to the engine on both sides. That last nut was a bit of a wrestle, and it's important not to swear at your car because you'll hurt its feelings. What you should do is just get the job done, and then you go and see your friend, which is what I'm going to do now. His name's Jack. He's around the corner. He costs about $20. I'm going to go get one of them. I'm going to come back. I'm going to face the rest of the music. Fortunately, Jack wasn't home, but his brother Jim was here. Now, as I said, it's important. Don't swear at the car. You'll hurt its feelings, and it's your horse. This little guy wants to work hard for you. You just got to show him the right love. So, once we've finished with Jim, we'll get the catch tractors off. Okay, so they were really easy to remove once you undid all the bolts, and what I did, pulled the gaskets off. I marked which side was the exhaust side, which side is the engine side, because there seems to be a little bit of a lip here, and the flat side looks like it's on the engine side, and there's a little tiny raised bit, but not as much as these guys, that's on the exhaust side. So now we put the new gaskets on, and we try the impossible task of getting the new cat tractor on and lining it up yourself. So to prepare our new cat to go on, we've got to remove the old oxygen sensor, put it on the new cat. First step, lots of that. Now we go see Jimmy again while that soaks in. Okay, the best way to remove the oxygen sensor is with the proper tool. You can get these from any good tool shop or even a bad one. Now if you don't have a vise, you can position the socket against the ground and you can hit the catalytic converter and it'll come undone quite easily. Again, a lot of penetrating oil. Apply a little bit of this never see stuff. Make sure you don't get any on the actual sensor part, just on the threads, just a little bit, and whack it back in. These guys will feel like they're not going to come off, but where you don't have brains, you've got brute force. And you've got a backyard bush mechanic here without a hammer. But where there's a fat guy, there's always a hammer. One dusty weight that's never used. As I said, right tool for the job. Just look up O2 sensor removal tools. Cost you about 30 bucks. Get it on there, a place you can swing it. Give it a tap. and it comes right off. Now there's a very specific torque setting for these called FT. The second letter T stands for tight. I'll leave you to figure out what the F is for. Now I've got the unenviable task of trying to line this up on my own. Slides right on. Piece of cake. The reason you want to turn the battery off is right next to the alternator here. And believe me, I've turned one into a welder before. It's not pretty. It was a VK, and all I saw was this big metal wire glowing red hot and then just split in half. It's called a fusible link. I had to get another wire, connect it up, drive it to an auto electrician, and he laughed at me. Changing the spark plug, it was the spark plug on the left bank closest to the front bumper. Okay, that catch tractor's on. It's not tightened up yet. I'll do that when I get the other one on. Obviously, don't forget your gasket. And bring the light over so you can see where you're putting the gasket. I forgot how terrible that side is. Gasket's pretty good, it just stays on, the bolts are so long. That's why it's a nightmare to take off. And the gasket just sits there just waiting for you to bring the catch tractor up. Now I'm not confident holding that nut in my hand, getting between the oil filter, air conditioner stuff, oxygen sensors and everything else, without that nut falling down to the ground. So what I've done, grabbed myself a socket, duct tape, it ain't going anywhere, it'll make it a lot easier to put it on. That's if I don't drop the socket. So all 8 nuts, left and right, are on. They're not tightened up. I've got to connect the oxygen sensors, and I'm tempted to drag the other exhaust system in, hook the back oxygen sensors up to that without it being connected, and start it up with just the extractors. Tempted. Just got to talk to the horse about it, see if he likes it. One of these for $9 is probably the best $9 you're going to spend for your kit. Got a little hook on the end of it so you can latch it to things. Just makes everything so much easier. Just connecting up the oxygen sensor. It goes one way, you push it in, you'll hear it click. Like that. Find the little green tab, stick it through. Now all we've got to do is tighten the bolts up, which I'm not looking forward to, but that's about 80% of the job done. So the other side's all done up. And like I said, it's important not to swear at your car, because it's your horse. And I think of it as my horse is on the operating table, and he's in a lot worse state than I'm in. And you will lose a bit of skin on there, but women pay a bit of money for that. Exfoliating, they're called, I think. I see people yelling and swearing at cars and carrying on and whatnot. You just keep plodding on, get the job done. Now if a mate or two helping, providing there's no nuts or bolts underneath that are giving you any grief as far as being seized up, and they start on the catch tractors, this is easily a morning long job and a bit into the afternoon. Now I've been mucking around filming and cameras and going into town and back for lunch, and started at breakfast, after breakfast, finished by tea time. Now when I undid this, I reckon it was a Grandma FT. They weren't on very tight at all, so I would just torque them up nice and snug, nothing too heavy. And because there's 4, I go in diagonals as I torque them up, so it's nice and even when it's getting torqued. There's no gasket goo or anything like that on there because there wasn't any when I pulled it off, so I might regret that later. I don't think so. The good thing about doing the worst bolt last is it just goes on by hand. It's so easy. Now the spanner that got it undone doesn't back up. Now that's all torqued up pretty much how I found it. Now we've got to put the rest of the exhaust on. The easy part. After replacing the oxygen sensors, it's time to get the exhaust back on the car. That's not my car. I haven't started it yet. There's someone outside. Good thing about this kit, it comes with all the gaskets and the bolts you need. I hope. Now this has gone from a 3-piece to a 4-piece, and I don't know if that's good or bad. Now we've got a bit of a problem. It says bolt on, but they didn't tell me I need extension cords for the oxygen sensors. They ain't going on. They're going to be close. Once I nip it all up and tuck it all up in the system, they might get there. Now it's time for the next 2 pieces to go on before the mufflers. And I think we might be okay for the oxygen sensors. I think. This is not a comfortable job, but once we get out, hopefully it's all worth it. Now it's time for the last 2 mufflers to go on. Have a look at it, tighten it up. Now that we've got crutch cam, don't forget, lube her up. Well, it's all on, but just. I haven't tightened it up. I'm going to start from front to back. I'm not really happy with how it's hanging because it seems to hit the bracket, but whether it nips up and clears that bracket, we'll see. And I'm not happy about the oxygen sensor plugs yet, but we'll see. Well, it was tight, but the oxygen sensors just went on. Now you really want a friend throwing tools underneath the car to you, because I've needed extension joints, universal joints, and getting out from under the car and getting back under the car, I'm going to be sore. So the exhaust is pulled up now, it's no longer hitting this bracket, so that's good. O2 sensors just went on, that's good. Now I've just got to nip up the back. Now on the last exhaust, I didn't find any Celastic anywhere. So I've gone for the Celastic free option again. And if it leaks, I'll cross that bridge when I come to it, but I don't think it will. Okay, so now the horse is awake, it's recovered. We just got to see how she feels. There's a little bit of resonance in the back when it's idling up. And then once it idles down and goes away, I'll have a look at that. It's probably a tailpipe that's just a bit too close to the bumper bar. It's very important to come as far out over the bumper bar as you can so that the sound waves don't go up in your cavity. That could be causing it, but I'll have a look at it. I can't hear any exhaust leaks. I'll get it up to temperature, see how she goes. I won't be upset if smoke comes out of the engine because I sprayed it with a lot of penetrating oil, so that'll burn off. Horse is happy. Take the dipstick out to get my hands in there, so I had to put it back in. Now I hope you enjoyed stage 9 modification of the VF SV6 Commodore. That's right, we're up to stage 9 and we'll just explain how that works. So I appreciate you watching me. If you enjoyed the video, enjoyed the modifications, click like and subscribe. Next time we'll see you, we'll do some maintenance, drop the transmission fluid, change the diff oil before we go on the dyno.